Hello again, and welcome to Can You Hear Me? I'm Eileen Rochford, CEO of the marketing and strategy firm, the Harbinger Group.
And I'm Rob Johnson, president of Rob Johnson Communications. As we know, the role of communications professional has changed dramatically within companies everywhere. Aside from having to be nimble to the ever-changing expectations when it comes to taking a stance on nearly every social issue, these company leaders are having their roles expand beyond simply communicating company values. They are now being asked to have a seat at the table where major strategic decisions are being made.
Or they should be if they're not.
Right.
That's our opinion, and we'll dig into that today. But before we dive in a little deeper on that, let's cover some statistics shared recently by PR firm Weber Shandwick. They recently hosted a communications-centric roundtable. It was covered in PR Daily and a few other media outlets. When I was really glad to see that it got covered because it was super thought-provoking. So according to their research, which I'll mention, this has also been borne out in similar studies, those done by UCLA, the Edelman Trust Barometer, and others that we've talked about here on the show in the past. The vast majority of consumers expect companies to take a stand on human rights, that's 82%, climate change, that's 73%, racism, that's 72%, and gun violence, 70%. In fact, that same research found that 65% of employees feel companies have a responsibility to speak up, even if an issue is sensitive or controversial.
This has been the way of the world for the past few years, right? It has nothing to do with us as brand X, right? No, I shouldn't say brand X because there is an X brand now. Brand Y. Let's call it brand
Good
Y.
point. Yep, there we go.
So brand Y doesn't say anything about the big political issue or environmental issue or whatever the case may be. And now they get punished for it. And before they'd say, well, that doesn't have anything to do with us. And they could sit on the sidelines. And now the expectations, not only from the consumers, but as you mentioned, the people that work there is, where do you stand on this? Or where do you stand on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything is global, right? And I don't mean in terms of the geographical sense. I mean, there are repercussions that are multidimensional on every single issue to every single company. And it's a question of those that you quite honestly choose to talk about or be associated with, and whether you should choose to talk about them because there is a connection to your organization. And in some cases, whether it's a direct connection or not, it's meaningful to the constituents or customers or clients you serve. And therefore, it is something that you should have a perspective on, at a minimum. So there is no such thing as just burying your head in the sand anymore for any organization, any entity of any type.
Nobody can afford to do that. And the people that used to bury their heads in the sand figured out pretty quickly, we better stop doing that because the world around us has changed. So that's a really good point to make.
For sure. And when people come to work, they don't just come to work as, automatons. Not that we ever did, but we sure pretended that we did for decades and decades and decades. When people come literally to work now with the expectation of bringing their whole selves, that has repercussions, ramifications for every entity. So when making decisions about any type of communications, you have to bear in mind the landscape, as I said, ramifications. And I think, in my opinion, communications people are uniquely equipped to sit at that table with the other strategists, the other members of your executive leadership team, or whatever strategy setting entity that you have established in your organization. And here's why I think that communications folks are so uniquely equipped. In most cases, many of us have had training in journalism. The inquiry that you're taught, that methodology in journalism, how that plays out in a corporate setting or an organizational setting is this: we're not afraid to ask why, and we're not afraid to continue asking why or why not. And we have a unique seat. Let's call it point of view, because many of us as communicators, we're constantly consuming information that's external and really paying attention to what's being talked about, what's important. That is inherent in how we think and how we act and how we show up at work every day. So people like us, smart leaders of any entity, any type of organization, should want to have that kind of thinker, that kind of analyst, that kind of synthesizer at the table when they're establishing strategy in today's environment. That's my opinion.
You said a couple of things that are absolutely spot on that I wanted to comment about. First of all, the expectation people have when they come to work about bringing their whole selves, I think is what you said. That's also very generational. So whereas, maybe for our generation when we were a little bit younger, that wasn't as pronounced, but a lot of people and a lot of millennials that are now becoming, they're heading into decision-making roles in their companies. They want to work with people that care about making the world a better place. All right, you're a successful company, you make money, blah, 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 but what are you doing to make the world a better place? And those questions are being asked now, and the people that are truly in leadership positions better have a good answer. And the other thing you mentioned about communications professionals, many with journalism backgrounds, is we also are used to looking around corners a lot of times. So why is it a natural fit to be sitting at that table now? Because yes, you need to communicate your message, but we're also sitting there. I'm thinking, and I know you are too, we all are thinking like 3-4 steps ahead. Well, if this happens, then what's going to happen here, then here, here, here. And that's how our minds work in general. So I think those two things are addendums I would like to make to the very good points you were making.
Very good. Yeah. Another thing occurred to me as I was thinking through this show, why communicators, should be at the table when strategy is being discussed, pondered, explored, etc. We think communicators, and that's whether you've had a journalism training background or not. I believe that we, more so than other strategists, shall we call them, we think in terms of stories.
Yes. Tell a good story. What's the story?
What's the story? What is the story that will be told about us if we do this, if we don't do this? What are the reputational repercussions?
But the story has to connect. So it's more than just the reputational part. It's what story you're going to tell that's going to connect with whoever the audience is in this particular case. And can you afford to swing and miss and have it not connect?
Yeah.
You can't afford that, especially if you don't get do-overs. And a lot of places, we don't get do-overs.
We're the narrators, right? We're the observers and the narrators. And so I could be sitting at that table and listening to, said CEO and said CMO and said chief operations officer tell the story that they think they're going to tell. And what I'm hearing is the story that's going to be heard. And those are two different things. And it's really important to have both of those, perspectives in play. Not because you should dictate your strategy based on, the whims of the publics you serve. Heck no. We all know that. But what we can tell you is if you go in that direction, you're going to be confronted with this outcome. And is that the one you want? Right. So it does have really important bearing. I think that the communications mindset being present in all of those conversations. And the really smart CEOs, they know that. They're already doing this. We're not saying anything new. We're not, but if you're not, those are the people who we'd really like to kind of, perk up their ears right now. It feels
a little self-serving for us as communications professionals saying, hey, communication's really important. And and it's not our opinion. We're not just elevating this, even though we are by having this podcast discussion, but it's also the way of the world. It's also the way things are happening. And to get back to the roundtable you were referring to earlier, that was attended by comms professionals at big corporate names that everybody knows, like United, Kraft Heinz, Mars, Bristol Myers Squibb. And it was how the role of a communications professional has changed, where one executive said they're now being considered an advisor, a builder, a connector. So you might be the advisor that's being that's advising on communications issues, but all of a sudden you're asked to sit there and help build something, to build the strategy, and then to connect the dots when you are building that strategy. And I think that's where this evolution is headed.
Yeah. The job has changed even just in the past 5 years. It's astonishing, the rate. And as I've said, the smart companies are elevating the wise, sharp communicators in their organizations to have that seat at the table. And they're thinking through, how do I embed a communicator, communications presence in almost every aspect of our business so that we can inject that kind of thinking. And as you put it, Rob, the kind of looking around corners, because that's what they need to do. It's that stay one step ahead. And that skill or those skills, I should say, that we've been describing the last couple of minutes, those are skills that can't can't be replaced by, say, artificial intelligence. That is impossible.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, I mean, I guess thank
Wait,
goodness.
my mind matters? Oh, okay. Stop the presses.
Right. But it's funny. You think about the biggest issues, facing business, right here, right now. Of course, artificial intelligence being one of them. The ability to think in the ways that we've just described and bring that, elevation of synthesizing. That's always a hard word for me to say.
That is a tough one.
It is. It's a tough one. But to bring that ability to the table, there's just no way, in my opinion, that you would get that at any level other than from really well trained in the classical critical thinking research mindset that frankly used to be part of a typical liberal arts degree. And a lot of that's been kind of swept away in favor of more practical, actionable, take it to a career type of skills, even in marketing. It's fascinating.
I have to say too, if I can just veer off just for a second on that point you were making, I found that you went to Marquette, I went to DePaul with a W in Greencastle, Indiana, and it was a liberal arts education, which I really liked having because I was going to learn, as I went through my communications degree, I was going to learn about the technical things I needed to learn about. But when I first started in television as a reporter, you had to be an expert on different things. So the fact that I knew something about religion or philosophy or government or various other things would come in handy all the time. And I did learn the technical skills at some point, sometimes on the job. But the fact that I had the background of critical thinking and had an understanding about different things that weren't just like how to press a button and how to make a camera go on or something like that. Yeah, they'll teach you that. But do you have those requisite skills that are going to help you be a critical thinker, which will, I think, help you be successful in whatever you do?
Yeah. So as you're looking for that communicator to bring onto your team or several, and to kind of plug into those places that we've just described, making sure that they have had, I'm not going to call it training. We're just going to call it preparation. It's a real guidance in critical thinking in particular, and things like research. It's fascinating, right? I keep coming back to many of these folks who are frankly the best at this came from journalism backgrounds because the ability to research and find information and then pull it together and connect dots. That you get that in a traditional journalism program. Did you know that Northwestern University, I heard, they're not going to call it a journalism program anymore, and they may even move that to the side. It was in the magazine that my husband gets as an alum, kind of the direction that's going. And I mean, he went to Medill and he was absolutely aghast. What is happening?
So what's the pivot?
This I'm going to tell our listeners. We'll get back to you on that, or I'll put it in the show notes because I didn't actually read the article. I think, and Mike was even having trouble forming words after he read this. So I didn't get the whole story as a consequence. He was just so upset about what this could mean.
You think about a noted, a renowned school like that, like a Medill, and then they're like, yeah, we're gonna call it something else, and you're like, oh gosh, and
I'm just predicting that this is going to bounce the other way, soon enough, especially as we realize that artificial intelligence can only get us so far, and those critical thinking skills, those universities, colleges who are that still deliver courses that teach philosophy, critical thinking, those kinds of things. They're going to win out in this debate because those are the things that you can't teach a computer. You just simply can't.
I hope you are right.
Yes, I know. Sometimes, speaking it into reality might be what I'm trying to do, but then again, as I piece this together, it just feels to me like those are the gaps. And more and more when conversations are being had, I may have mentioned this on one show recently. When I was at a ESG panel at Marquette University, it was Sustainability 2.0 was the conference, and there was I don't know what you would call it, a consortium of different entities, all in Milwaukee, banding together to submit a really cool idea about delivering power essentially in a different way. So, but the thing was this, we're listening to all those people at the table talk about how they're pulling this idea together. And I'm sitting next to a person who was a CMO at a publicly traded entity, large company. And we both look at each other like, where is the communications person? Because we were having such a hard time understanding the concept that they were stringing together. And I knew it was a great idea, but they couldn't explain it, in a cogent, succinct manner. And that is problematic because because, leadership is communications, as a recent guest said. And I cannot stop repeating that statement, but it ties in here again.
Do you know that Mark Houston quote? I start some of my trainings now. You know how you have like,
and you give him credit, right?
Oh, of course I give him credit. Yes,
of course you do.
No, it's
you're
it's
traditionally
like
trained journalist.
I got Mark Twain. I got a Winston Churchill quote to start things off,
and then there's Mark Houston. Oh my God,
I got Mark Houston. He's right at the top. I've done that a couple of times since he was on our podcast because he nailed it. And I remember when we both heard it, we went, "Whoa!"
Yes. Okay, so let's wrap this up in a bow because I think we've been taking this in some pretty interesting directions. Essentially, I think what I took away from the reporting that was done on the panel that was held by Weber Shandwick, and completely agree with, because we've been seeing this ourselves in so many places, is that the communications professional, the me, the other consultants, who kind of operate at this level, that is our role. We're now a bridge to strategy, a connection, or even from strategy out. Communications is now corporate affairs. Internal communications may now be better identified, as they called it in this article, strategic business communications. And frankly, I loved that because, as we know, and we've said this a lot on this show, and we say this to our clients all the time when we're doing trainings, there is no such thing as an internal communication. And we've known that for decades. So we can't just do internal communications. That's that kind of mentality of head in the sand. We're going to pretend this isn't happening type communications, if you ask me anymore. All communications are subject to external exposure, and they're all transparent now. So it's strategic business communications. And I just think that's the most beautiful descriptor.
Whether you're dealing with ESG issues, investor relations, sales, or like M&A, there is internal communication that goes on, but it's only to get everybody aligned so that you can go externally and make your case to the public and explain, hopefully in a uniform kind of way, what you stand for and what your company is going to do. So internal communication, we don't want people to think it doesn't exist. It does, but only as a bridge to getting out there in the marketplace and sharing with everybody about what you do and what you stand for.
Mm-hmm. And you can never create a communication for an organization with just the lens of the organization for that reason. That's why internal almost is just a label that just doesn't apply anymore.
It's just the precursor to, it's like the appetizer before the entree. It's like, it does exist, but then you're going to go have the entree, and that's external comms. So the tide, I think we've explained a little bit, has shifted. So it used to be where the decisions were made on high, and the communications professional was then expected to execute those decisions. Hey, here's the message, go, send that out. But now they're helping shape the strategy from within and then making sure it's implemented externally. I think we were just talking about that. And the reason it can be a good fit is because those leaders that are now doing more than just communicating are naturally comfortable asking tough questions, which gets us back to what you were talking about earlier, Eileen, which was the journalism background. And it's no problem for people like us to ask tough questions in a respectful, collaborative kind of way. And they have to be asked, and somebody better have a good answer for them, right?
Totally. I think when, Start With Why was written, they were thinking about the journalist or the communicator.
Right?
Just kidding. But for real, like, we're the ones always asking, well, why? Or why not? Or what could be done differently?
Right. Especially when somebody tells you this is the way it's been done. This is the way we've done it for 70 years.
Yeah. I hope that's been stripped out of the language of anyone, who listens to this show.
There's still a few of those people walking around, I think. Not many.
Yeah. There's a little bit of that, even if it's like you don't even realize it. Like, it's that implicit kind of embeddedness, and it just comes out in your behavior. So, okie dokie. All right. I don't know. There's a couple things that I would say when I think about this role, and I think about the need for communicators to be part of that team that you form to create strategy. I would just say that there's things that you can do. This isn't like a checklist or anything, but maybe when you are considering, should I have those people at the table, go through some of these thoughts. So having someone at the table who is embedded in business, processes throughout your organization, who then helps you with setting strategy, is going to enable you to more fully consider expectations that your customers may have, or your clients that may have, and their perspectives that you're probably not factoring in to the degree that you should. Again, that global point of view that they would bring to the table. Having folks like us be part of strategic conversations, those, internal on your teams, they're going to help help you consider reputational impacts from all angles in ways that you very likely are not equipped to do without them. So bear that in mind. And if you haven't already thought through, and I alluded to this at least twice now, whether you have enough communications expertise, representation present throughout your business, you should do an assessment like that, because having those folks have enough touches into all the ways that your business works and will give you that ability to look around corners in a really unique way that can be highly, highly valuable to you. It can help you identify emerging challenges that you might not be thinking about in terms of negative impact to reputation and lots of other things. So my advice is to find ways to have your communications experts be touching the different business processes so that they can bring back to you that kind of observation and analysis. And I'll tell you one little story that I thought was kind of interesting because it happened to me very recently. I was talking to a CEO client, and they were talking about real excitement over a new process, a big kind of transformational program that they're going to be kicking off, and it will be happening over the course of 12 to 18 months or so, and wanting to be able to talk about the outcomes, the story of how we got here when they get there. So again, presumably that's in 12 to 18 months, right? And so I asked the question, who's your documentarian as you're going through that? And that stopped them dead in their tracks. Wait a second. I haven't even thought along those lines. I said, to be able to tell the story, you're going to have someone playing that role of documentarian to capture those interactions, those moments when you pivoted and you didn't even know it at that time, that's when the pivot occurred. But because you have that person playing that role, you'll be able to pinpoint that's when it happened and describe it in great detail. Yeah.
You should run a company. Oh, wait, you already are.
True.
Brilliant.
I know. Well, anyway, that's just one example. And that was today. So there you go.
It's current events. We love it when we have advice to give everybody, and it's not from 3.5 years ago, even though some of it can be. So many of these issues we're talking about these truly are current events, and it's happening right before our eyes. And to see communications professionals get a real seat at the table is pretty good. Yeah,
it's a very different profession, even from 5 years ago, the one that we're in and the seat that I sit in. But it's exciting too, because it's funny when I think back, oh gosh, when I was like 25, it's a long time ago. And I was hearing how at Golan Harris and at Ketchum, the smartest people who ran those companies talk about how communicators should be playing the role as strategists. And that felt to me like it was so far away from happening. And it was largely, but right now it's reality. Yeah. It's actually come to fruition within my, professional lifetime, which is...
They were forward thinkers even back then. And look where that's where the world met them.
Yeah.
Right?
Really good stuff.
Well, that was very interesting and enlightening. And I think it's fascinating how the world has changed for communications professionals, and some of them aren't even called that anymore because of the names that we have already thrown out there for you. But that's going to do it for another edition of Can You Hear Me? I'm Rob Johnson. We love to hear from our listeners. And if you have any thoughts on today's topic or any other topic you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please reach out to us on social media. We now have a Can You Hear Me podcast page on LinkedIn.
Yes. And every time we post a show, we're really hoping that you guys will tell us what you think of it, as well as give us reviews wherever you get your Can You Hear Me podcast. So I'm Eileen Rochford. Thanks again, everybody, for listening today. And remember, you can find Can You Hear Me wherever you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Till next time. Thank you.